Today, finally, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a major ruling that could reshape American trade policy, that potentially affects prices, markets, global economic relations, and that finally explained to Donald Trump what the presidency actually is in a democracy. It took quite a while, though, U.S. Supreme Court. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down the extreme sweeping tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, ruling that the administration exceeded its authority under federal emergency powers law. So what does this mean for the U.S. economy and for the world? Let's break it down. The central issue was the use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. The court ruled, contrary to Donald Trump, that this statute does not authorize the president to impose sweeping global tariffs in this manner. In other words, the justices concluded that broad trade measures of this scale require clear congressional approval. Now, it's important to note that this decision does not eliminate every tariff currently in place. Some tariffs enacted under different trade laws remain in effect. But a substantial portion of the tariffs imposed under this president are now invalid. This is both an economic U.S. Supreme Court decision as well as a constitutional one. Now, the financial markets are already seeing early gains in import-heavy sectors following the ruling. Companies relying heavily on imported goods could see lower costs going forward because tariffs function as a tax, as we tried to explain to Donald Trump, on people who purchase imports, and removing them reduces import costs for products like electronics, clothing, machinery, and auto parts. However, businesses may unfortunately still take time to adjust pricing, and some may retain savings to strengthen margins rather than immediately lowering retail prices. There are also fiscal implications. The federal government collected substantial tariff revenues under these policies. Depending on how the ruling is implemented, some portion of those collections could become subject to refund claims. So near term, there's potential cost relief for businesses and gradual price effects. But there also may be some policy uncertainty as to how to refund all that money. Now, the longer-term effects may be more significant. First, the ruling increases predictability in trade policy, and this is something Donald Trump doesn't understand. Businesses and global partners now have clear guidance about the limits of executive authority in imposing broad tariffs. They can now predict that Trump can't do this again, and that's simply good for short and long-term strategic business predictions. Second, many economists argue that tariffs reduce overall economic efficiency by raising costs and distorting trade flows. With some of these tariffs removed, there may be modest long-term economic benefits, depending on how policy evolves. Globally, the decision could erase trade tensions. Major trading partners facing these tariffs may now encounter fewer barriers, which could improve economic relations and across-the-border investment. Finally, constitutionally, the ruling reinforces Congress's role in setting trade policy. Now, if you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing and let me know in the comments, do you think this ruling will meaningfully lower prices?